Hey guys, welcome to OCD Recovery. I wanted to do a video today on guilt and shame in the context of Real Event OCD. And I think I had this for many years, which I didn't realize at the time because I was so hyper focused on my other big themes, which were contamination OCD and relationship OCD. So I didn't really have any, really any inkling that, I was fixating on real events of my life. And there were many real events of my life that I was fixating on, and it took me many years to overcome. Honestly, like the guilt and the embarrassment of some of those things, and also just being able to accept some of those things as part of my life, as something that happened as part of my history. But before I go into that, please subscribe to this channel. Let us know what you think, and if you have any questions, please let us know. I'm also enjoying having a kind of like nighttime cityscape kind of like background. I've never done that. Like the sun just went down like an hour ago, and I just thought why not try and do like a new kind of background as well. Um, Trying to talk about my dark past. No. That was a bad joke. Why did I do that? I don't know. Anyway, so I think there were 4 or 5 different real events that in my life, that I was really fixating over. And I won't go into a lot of them because some of them are just like really personal as well. And I mean, I've shared some of them with people on one-to-one calls, but then there are other ones like I just prefer not to like talk about that much. But yeah, there were a lot of very serious things that happened to me when I was kind of like in my mid-teens, especially. There were a couple of uh, uh, traumatic events that happened in my life, and then there were some other things where there was like a very personal breach of privacy that happened with me. Like something very deeply personal about me became kind of like, not came like my close people in my life became aware of it, and not of my own volition. It just happened, and that was like a really hard and stressful time for me as well. um and then there was also like this kind of like cyber bullying kind of incident that happened again. That was another incident of another kind of like violation, I would say, that happened where uh, something very personal about me became kind of like public knowledge among certain people, like a group of people. And it just I mean, I felt like some of those years were like back to back to back to back with like really stressful and very difficult things that happened. And I think a lot of those things, I was absolutely mortified by some of those things, and I carried the embarrassment and shame and guilt from those things for, I think, from my early slash mid teens till I was easily like 25. So easily for a decade, I would say. I was carrying a lot of that um, guilt and shame. Also because, and there were so many different beliefs and so many different like fears at play, because one, there was also definitely a lot of like anger and resentment towards people for like doing like a breach of my privacy, and like getting access to, or like trying to like search certain things about me and knowledge about me and finding that out. That was, I mean, there was a lot of bitterness, I think, on that front that I had. And from that also came like this real sense of like violation. And I think like someone who also goes through and this is something that I've spoken about quite a lot, someone who goes through sexual abuse as well. I think the feeling of being like violated, and then like something that like and the sense of shame that comes with that is so intense. And a lot of people, like a lot of kids who get sexually abused, like carry that sense of like guilt and shame with them for a long time as well. And so, and with some of these incidents that happened, there was surely like a lot of like shame that came with that. And not just not in the case of like, oh, it was twofold. One side was like I felt shameful that something very personal just like became knowledge to other people that I had like no choosing over. And then there was also guilt for towards my own self because I felt guilty for like why wasn't I more careful? I should have been more, I should have been more vigilant. I should have kept an eye out. I should have done this. I should have done that. Like I was really then while there was anger and resentment and bitterness towards like other people for doing certain things to me, there was also a lot of like self like hate as well for letting something happen to me. So there was a lot of like a feeling of self rejection, and which I've done like a couple of videos on that as well. Like there was a sense of me rejecting my own self, and just like not liking myself and not being comfortable in my skin, and there was a certain sense of responsibility and justice that I felt like I had to exercise towards my own self. So whether someone else did something or not, I was, I felt like I had to be more vigilant to do something. And on top of that, of course, like just the complete helplessness that I felt that, information about me is with other people, and now they are thinking things about me that are completely out of my control. My relationship OCD with my friendships was around this specific fear of other people misunderstanding me or other people having opinions about me that are not like in my control or influence. So with these real events, like that fear just like literally was just like in my face because it was actually happening. People were having opinions about me that like were completely out of my control, and that felt incredibly uncomfortable. And I felt pretty helpless. And if I really do think about it, to be honest, like that time is a little bit of a blur. While it's a blur, I also remember parts of it very vividly as well. And there are parts of it that like if I really think about it, I think I went through some kind of like latent like depressive phase in my life with some of those things. One second. Yeah. I think I went through like some latent depression with some of those things because again, I was just a teenager. I was just a kid. I had no clue like this like whirlwind of like real events that were happening one after the other. And there was no time for me to make sense of them because it's like something has happened and it's like okay, tomorrow I have to go to school. Oh, now I have to do my homework. Oh, like I have my family coming over and relatives coming over. I have to go. I have to entertain them. Or oh, we're going out for dinner. And it's just like in the midst of all of that, I again, as a kid, you have absolutely no clue what's going on and you can't make a lot of sense of things. So as I was growing older, then my rather than me moving on from some of these things, my fixation on those things started to grow. Again, classic OCD fashion, where I carried that sense of guilt and shame and resentment towards other people all collectively. All these like emotions, like this ball of emotions all together was coming up. And I think like if I were to like kind of like cut the story short, because there's so much that happened in between as well. I think when it comes to working on unconditional self-acceptance and also unconditional life acceptance over here, and unconditional other acceptance, like also accepting other people as well. I think I had to work on like all three fronts, and work on all three aspects in order to kind of come to a place of like having made peace with all the messiness and the chaos that happened in my life, whether it was due to anything that I did or didn't do, or whether it was like completely someone else's fault. Like again, I think in my view, I think most things that, for the most part, I think majority of the things that happen to human beings, and this is just my personal opinion, I think it's like a mix of what did you contribute to the situation yourself as well. Not in terms of like, oh, you are to blame for it, but like you recognizing that there were certain things that you did that perpetuated the situation, or like that kind of like became in some ways the one of the propellants in like making that situation happen. And that's a good thing to have. That's a good thing to kind of like realize, because there's a lot of like self accountability that comes with it. And when you have self accountability, it gives you a sense of also a good amount of like healthy control over like your life as well, because then you don't feel just like a complete victim to circumstance, and you don't feel completely helpless or and powerless in the face of things that have happened to you, even in the face of things that were, you know, not in your control. Even then, I think like there's a certain sense of like, I think, stability that one can also feel, feeling like you've been able to, you know, kind of that you have influence over things. Again, in a good way, not in a compulsive way of like trying to control things, but like, and we say that for recovery as well, that um, recovery is up to you. It is very much up to you. It is in your, in some senses, it is in your control whether you recover and like when you recover. You can't like force recovery to be like, hey, I want to recover in 3 months. But yes, it what does matter is like, are you putting in the work? Are you doing some of those things? So with like, I don't know why my phone keeps slipping, but anyway, I can keep readjusting, it's fine. But with a lot of those things, I think I had to there were a few things I had to think about. I think for me, one of course, like there was a phase where I had to kind of almost like, I feel like it was part of those growing pains where I had to go through a phase of like just blaming everyone else for like, this person did this and that person did that, and it's like that person's fault and this person's fault and this and that. Like I had to go through a little bit of that phase, but I think very soon, that didn't last maybe that long for most things, but I also then really had to take like a hard look in the mirror as well, and really think about what did I do in order in perpetuating some of those things. And if I really think about, let's say, my personal information and privacy being breached, like I mean, it doesn't justify that other people did that. I mean, it's still very wrong that that happened. I think, but what I think about is that, what did I contribute to that situation? What I contributed to that situation was being a little idealistic, and therefore, as a result of having this like idealism, as a teenager, I was not very careful about things. I was very just like blah about certain things, very carefree, which I think I maybe now, obviously now looking back, it's easy to say I shouldn't have, but I think it was one of the most valuable lessons that I learned, and it was one of the biggest reality checks I think that I had at the time, which I carried forward into my actual adulthood. And I think some of those lessons are still very much there, where I'm far more like vigilant about, again, my privacy and things that I want to keep personal, and how to protect some of my privacy, and things like that. So I'm not as uh, like, if someone wanted, like, you know, to know information about me or whatever, like they can't like just find it. But I think I, because of my idealism and having like a very, this like rose tinted thing of like, oh, no one's going to like really do anything bad to me, or no one's like really going to go around snooping about like my life. Who would do that? So there was this blind trust in people, I think I also had. And it's not that I've become cynical now, and I think that, oh, people must not be trusted. Again, it's a realistic middle ground where it's like, maybe, okay, there's certain people I can trust, there's certain people whose trust I think needs to be earned first. I mean, they need to earn my trust first, and then I can maybe open up in certain ways. So that's just one example I think that I took away from that. And I think, and again, I think the unconditional self acceptance comes from being able to accept that I did not have any of this insight back then, when I, you know, when some of those things happened. And I also cannot, therefore, like, it makes no sense to beat myself up for doing things I had no awareness about. It's like a kid that eats a cockroach. Like, the kid doesn't know that it shouldn't eat a cockroach, but I mean, maybe if the kid eats it, then it's like, what the hell did I just do? That's a bad example. Why is that the first example that came to my mind? I have never eaten a cockroach. I've never been through that, so I don't know why that came to my mind. But I mean, I think it's like a very gruesome kind of like example that it gets the point across, I think. So there was a lot of like self compassion I had to have for like my younger self, and I think that the part of my frustration also came from like just not accepting my life for having these what I would in my mind felt like things that were tainting my life, things that were blotches on my life, because in my mind life was supposed to be really nice and happy and like squeaky clean, and just the presence of really uncomfortable, really distressing times and really just like deeply hurtful things, it just felt like it was always going to make my life feel a bit ruined somehow. And I'm going to carry forward just the consequences from that, and it's just going to feel shitty. I'm not going to feel great about it, and it's going to dampen my happiness in some shape or form. And I think that's what really frustrated me, and therefore there was this deservingness as well. It was like I didn't deserve to go through all these things, and therefore have the rest of my life ruined, right? And that's where the fixation on like a lot of the like past stuff was also coming into play, because um it was kind of like in a very irrational way. I just like really wanted to really like erase the past, and I think the permanence of something actually having happened, that's where real event OCD can feel really sticky, in that sense where something that's actually happened in the past, it feels like such a permanent fixture of your life and it feels inescapable. That's where the fear of fear cycle comes in, because it's like, hey, it's not just like some random event that it's not like a what if thing that may or may not happen. This is stuff that actually happened. It's going to be part of my story. It's going to be part of my history. Why is it there? It shouldn't have been there. This, I need to kind of like somehow crop this little part of my life out. And so when you're working on unconditional acceptance with real event OCD, what you really have to keep in mind as well is that the point of unconditional acceptance is not to completely eliminate and eradicate every sense of like guilt and shame from your life, and not feel it at all in your life. The point of it all is to at least bring it down from those chronic levels that you're feeling it, and bring it down to like more like healthy levels, right? So with these 4 or 5 real events that I had, there was a lot of like, again, a lot of chronic emotions in general, right? There was I feel like there was a lot of like relentless kind of sadness. There was chronic guilt, there was chronic shame, there was chronic embarrassment, chronic regret. I mean, it goes hand in hand with all of these. And there was a lot of, again, there was a lot of like sticky bitterness and anger as well that I had towards other people. And I think that there are certain instances in my life where, as a result of working on self acceptance, with some of those events, I think I don't feel any guilt and shame at all, to be honest. Like, because I've genuinely like come to a place of like real peace with some of those, even some of the most like messy things. Like, there's a lot of like acceptance I have for myself. There's also a lot of acceptance I have towards other people for doing those shitty things, because I'm also like, they have to be the ones to live with those some of those really bad behaviors. I don't. And that's their like burden to deal with, not mine. And they and part of the things that they did, I think like those are just, they speak to like really bad parts of someone's personality, and unless someone doesn't really want to work on those things, then it's probably going to affect them for the rest of their life. I mean, I hope they work on it, to be honest, so that it doesn't affect them for the rest of their life. But with some of those people, like some, like the things that I've heard, or the things that I've gotten to know about their life since then, it's just a little bit like, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't sound like they've changed, and therefore I don't think they sound very happy people. Again, and for their sake, I hope, but also that's not my responsibility, and that's not my burden to carry anyway. My only responsibility is, again, what I can do for my own self. And what I can do for my own self is work on my perspectives, like towards my own self or other people, and towards my life. That's the only main thing I can do, and I can try through my behaviors to not perpetuate that cycle of guilt. So my compulsions around people pleasing, my compulsions around trying to run away from guilt, the reassurance seeking, the confessing, the venting, the making sure, people are not upset with me, making sure I have not hurt anyone else's feelings, this and that. Those were the things that were keeping that belief alive, and that lack of self compassion and that self hate at times. That was keeping that alive. So I really had to like look at my beliefs plus my behaviors that were really keeping me stuck in that cycle of feeling pathetic. So but so with some of the things, I really don't feel any guilt, shame, embarrassment, anger, any of those things. But then there are some events in my life where I do feel some embarrassment, shame, and guilt and regret. I still feel it. But the reason that I also don't need to eradicate from that those feelings from my life completely is because, like, I accept that, like, part of my life will be tainted through guilt and shame and all these negative emotions, because me trying to then get rid of these feelings is me trying to perfect my life. Where is that going to get me? It's not going to get me anywhere, and it's going to keep me in a cycle of unacceptance, in fact. Not wanting to accept my life with mistakes and chinks and rough edges and things like that. And I think that, and in some ways, like, if you tell me that I could go back and change some of those things in the past and like prevent them from happening, I don't think I would, because, like I said, like, I think the some of those lessons that I learned in my teenage years, and of course I have that perspective now. At the time, I didn't feel that way. At the time, it felt like this can go to hell. Like, I don't want this in my life. I don't want this in my track record. I don't want the lessons. Like, forget it. Like, they can go away. But like, I think it's only with time and experience as well where those lessons have really come in handy in all sorts of my relationships and interactions, like in society in general, to be honest. And it's very hard for me to think that, okay, to go back and be like, oh, I want to erase that and not have that in my life. I really can't think of any one instance in my life that I would change. And I know this sounds like all, like, corny and wishy-washy, that, oh, like, I mean, I'm happy because everything got me to where I am. But no, that's true as well, because everything that I went through got me to where I am today, and I like the lessons I have in my life. I like the wisdom I have in my life. It helps me also, to be honest, become a better coach. It helps me become a better friend. It helps me become a better support to, like, anyone who reaches out to for support to me. Um, and it really helps me inform my future friendships and relationships as well. It just makes me feel like a very well-rounded person to have some of these ugly things that have happened in my life. So, and again, and I know in the moment when you're feeling really terrible, it feels like you're never going to not feel terrible. Um, but again, it's not about like you completely getting rid of the feeling. So what your aim should be in working on chronic guilt, shame, anxiety, regret, whatever it is around real event OCD, your aim is not to bring it down to zero. Your aim should be to, I don't know, if it's like a 10 out of 10, maybe bringing it down to like a 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10. That should be the aim, right? If it goes anything beyond that, that's a bonus, right? That's just a bonus. But it should be to be like, okay, I'm going to bring it down to a little bit of that level and see where I go then. Not to be like, I just want a squeaky clean life and kind of like erase the past and not ever think about it or completely forget it, and not have anything in my track record. Don't aim for that, because that's not really going to like make you a well-rounded person. It's going to and people also pick up on some of these things, like, and I'm not saying this in a boastful way, but like when people speak to me or like when people hang out with me and I'm just like talking to people, I'm not trying to sound smart or wise or anything, to be honest. Like, I'm just like having conversations with people, and then people will sometimes be like, oh, you know what, you're really like uh you really gave some good insights, or you really helped me out. No, you said some really nice things, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad that helped. I mean, I wasn't trying to help or say something smart or anything like that, but I mean, if you found some advantage of that, that's good. um so I don't know, I mean, like it's just something that other people are also able to see in you. Whereas before, the guilt and shame and everything that I was carrying around, people saw that as well, and people saw that there was this some kind of like big insecurity that I had, and I was carrying that around, and people can pick up on some of those things as well, and it reflects in the things that you say, and reflects in how you behave. Um, so overall, it just, again, your personality becomes kind of like a bit more, it becomes fuller, it becomes more well-rounded, and I like having like the toolkit that I have today because of some of those things. So um were those pleasant things to go through? Absolutely not. Like, they felt like hell, but I think i I also don't feel like I could have had perspective back then. I think I could only have perspective now, after all this time, after working on things and really trying to see things from different angles. And also from like there is also some gratitude involved as well, because when you speak to people around you, you can also sometimes see how it a lot of things could be far worse, a lot of things could have gone really bad as well. um, and I've been able to come out of like the fire, like, I mean, not, I won't say completely unscathed, but I think things have turned out all right. But so yeah, I think like things could have been forward. So there's a lot of like perspective that also happens with, when you get to just like speak to people in life and get to know their stories and their experiences in life as well. Not from a point of reassurance, but just from a point of like, oh, like I don't know, I don't know if how I would have felt going through some of those things. I don't know if I could have handled some of those things. So yeah, I mean, I think again, I'm not saying it's all sunshine and rainbows of like, oh, la di da. Like, when I think about life, I feel, I feel like there's a burst of like, a scent of roses, and I'm floating in jasmine, and I'm made of clouds. Like, no, I mean, honestly, like, as with some of those things, trust me, like, it's like, oh shit, like, I don't know how I went through some of those things. I don't know how that happened. Like, it was bad. It was really bad, to be honest. And some of those things do feel uncomfortable to still think about. I mean, I admit that. But again, it's not. It doesn't feel like I'm now carrying some kind of, there's something leeching off of me and, like, sucking my soul. There's no like real event. There's no like memory that's like sucking the soul out of me. Whereas before, that's how it felt like. It felt like my past was literally sucking my soul, and I just felt so. I just felt like I felt like a servant to my past, I think, in many ways, and that didn't feel good. So I wanted to talk about like specifically Real Event OCD, and just like kind of like narrate it more as a story and not so much as like, hey, this is step one and this is step two. I just want to narrate it more like a story of all the things that, of that, train of thought that happens when you go through Real Event OCD. And how, it's not something that it, if you have real event OCD and there are things that have happened in your life that are weighing you down, you don't like it does not have to become like the definitional point of you, but also you can also accept your life having some like ugly parts as well. Your life does not have to be squeaky clean. You were not promised a squeaky clean life. And you're not entitled to like a squeaky clean life either, because if you are entitled to it, then everybody else is as well, and we know that nobody really has a squeaky clean life that way. So yeah, I mean, I hope you find some points to relate to this, relate over here. Hopefully you see some of your own story, maybe in my story as well. And I mean, I can definitely go into like steps as well in how to overcome it and things like that. But let me know in the comments. Like, let me know what you think, and I'm definitely down to break it down in further videos and answer some of those comments as well. But take care, guys, and I'll see you soon. Maybe with another nighttime cityscape. Bye.